On this edition of the Nessun College Hockey Podcast, we'll give you our 3 stars of the week in Hockey East, preview this weekend's games, and we'll talk a little Hobey Baker. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Nessun College Hockey Podcast. I'm Dakota Randall, alongside always Patrick McAvoy. Pat, how are you?
I'm good.
You're good? That's it?
Yeah.
How was your weekend?
It was pretty solid.
Did you watch some football?
Watched some football. I'm sad to see the Titans lose.
Let's get this out of the way. Who's your Super Bowl pick?
Jimmy G.
Jimmy G? Okay.
Not even San
going with the
Francisco,
Niners, too.
just Jimmy G.
I don't even care about the Jimmy G thing. I think the Niners are better, and the Niners will beat the Chiefs. But anyway, we're here to talk about college hockey. We got a short but good show for you today. A lot of interesting results across the country, particularly in Hockey East. Decent shakeup in the national polls, as always. And there are plenty of games this weekend worth keeping an eye on. Also, we're starting to get some Hobey Baker buzz and talk. There's a fan ballot out, so we'll talk about that just a little bit. But before we go any further, I want to get into the schedule this weekend on the Nessun Networks. It all starts Friday with men's hockey East, Vermont at Merrimack at 7 p.m. on Nessun. And then at that same time, Maine at Boston College at 7 p.m. on Nessun Plus. And then the next night, Saturdays, part of our Super Saturday. A lot of college action going on the Nessun Network, especially college basketball. But we also have 2 hockey games. BU at Umass Lowell at 6 p.m. on Nessun. And then UMass Amherst at UNH at 7 p.m. on Nessun Plus. Remember, all of our Hockey East coverage is brought to you by Rockland Trust, where each relationship matters. So we'll get into that in a little bit. We'll get into some of the other stuff that we always talk about. But as always, we want to start with our 3 stars of the week in Hockey East. I'm going to start with UConn's Vladislav Fistov.
That was impressive.
Vladislav Fistov. He scored 3 goals over the Huskies' 2 victories over the week. We're going to get to UConn in just a little bit. But he scored the game winner on Wednesday as the Huskies erased a 2-0 deficit against Maine. And he scored 2 Saturday in an overtime win over Northeastern. It's a great week for UConn, and Vladislav Fistov was right at the middle of it. So for those reasons, he is my number 1 star of the week.
Up next, we got Logan Hutsko from BC. He had 3 goals as the Eagles got back on track with wins over UMass Lowell and BU. He finished the weekend with a +4 rating and 7 shots on goal. And in reality, he scored 3 goals. That's good enough for me, as a big BC fan as I am. A little biased for a pick from me, but it's Logan.
All right. Yeah, and we'll talk about BC in a little bit. Another great weekend for the Eagles. Finally, Mitchell Chafee, UMass. He had a hat trick in a 4-0 win over UVM. UVM's not a great opponent, but a hat trick is notable. And it was UMass's first hat trick since 2017 and the 21st in the school's history as a Division I program. So Mitchell Chafee got a hat trick, and that's good enough for me to land on the 3 stars of the week in Hockey East.
It's good enough for me as well.
Great. Okay, so there are a lot of stuff, a lot of games that happen across the country that I thought were really interesting. A lot of cool action going on, a lot of interesting results. And I know you had a couple series in particular, Pat, that you really focused on. Minnesota, Duluth, Denver having a tough time against Omaha. So what did you see over the weekend?
I'm officially out on Minnesota Duluth. That's what I saw. That's the
2-time defending national champions. You're out.
I'm out on them. Fact of the matter is they're a different
hasty,
team.
But you might be right.
They got swept by St. Cloud State, 2-1, and then 2-0. They were both good games, like they were competitive games. In the first game, both teams scored in the first period, but then St. Cloud State scored in the second, and that would be enough. They won 2-1, like I mentioned. And then game 2 is another close one. 0 goals scored in the first 2 periods by both teams, and then St. Cloud State scored twice in the third period to take the game. In reality, it probably isn't that big of a deal. St. Cloud State's a good team. We've mentioned them a few times. Minnesota Duluth, though, they've been up and down all season. We've talked about it all throughout the year on this podcast. The fact of the matter is I'm out on them. I think they'll probably make the tournament, like the NCAA tournament.
Oh, absolutely.
But in reality, I don't think they're going to move very far. And if they do, I don't know what I'll do. I'll do something. We can make an agreement later on. But I'm out. I have no faith in them anymore.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if a little bit of it has to do with, listen, this is a team that's won 2 straight championships. Do they have a little bit of that? Let's get this regular season over with and get to the playoffs. They're probably chomping at the bit to get a chance at that 3rd straight title. So you wonder if some of that is settling in. Obviously, there's always attrition, subtraction every year. for every program. So obviously there's some of that going on.
Yeah.
But again, it's hard to not imagine when the postseason comes around that they're not going to make some sort of noise. But we'll have to see. Maybe it is just a different team, and like you said, maybe we should be out on them. But yeah, agreed. It's curious weekend for Minnesota Duluth.
I agree with you what you're saying right there. I'm sure once the playoff comes around, we could expect them to do big things. But the same thing could be said about the Patriots each year, and didn't happen this year. And the same thing I think will be said about Minnesota Duluth.
Okay.
And now to another team that I'm kind of iffy on. Denver, they played Omaha. They tied both games, which, 2 points right there. That's fine. Game 1, they tied 1-1. Game 2, 2-2. Weird. Saying it out loud, that sounded weird. Game 2, they tied.
How do you even feel
2-2.
coming out of a weekend where you get 2 ties?
I would expect you feel bleh.
Pretty meh.
You feel
meh.
okay, like you're not on your A game. You're kind of out of it, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But like I meant, same thing as Minnesota Duluth versus St. Cloud State. Both games are competitive. First game, game 1, Denver took an early lead, but Omaha evened the score with just under 2 minutes left in the final period, and that was it. Tie game, 1-1. Game 2, Omaha struck first with 2 goals in the first period. Denver would cut the lead in half, but then they cut the lead in half in the second period, so it's 2-1 then. But then with 14 seconds left in the game, they tied the score. So in reality, that second game is probably a little bit of a boost for Denver, scoring with so little time left to tie the game, force overtime. Both games went to overtime, neither team would score. But,
Yeah.
They're not impressing me.
Yeah, I mean, but last week I did say in our, at the end of the podcast when we kind of previewed some of the games, I said, Omaha has looked good this season against some really good teams. It wouldn't surprise me if they pulled off an upset against Denver. Obviously, they did not pull off an upset, but they did tie both games. So in a way, that's really an upset if you ask me. So again, it's a few straight weeks now where we have forecasted some upsets or surprising results and been right. So let's respect the podcast is all I'll say about that.
I have heard some people call us the college hockey gurus before the streets.
I
Just walking down the streets of Boston, I've heard that.
I would not go that far. I also don't believe you.
It's fair.
But
I also don't live in Boston.
Okay. So good stuff, Pat. Yeah, I agree. Wondering what's going on with Denver a little bit. They should really, Omaha again is a better team than you would expect, but Denver should take care of them. So that's a little concerning. We'll see how they rebound next week. For me, you gave us a couple series sort of on the national stage. I want to highlight a few things from Hockey East that I thought were interesting, especially UConn, a team we've talked about a lot this season.
Fair.
A little underrated in Hockey East. Listen, they're not amazing. They're right on the edge of making the postseason, but they had 2 wins. A 3-2 come-from-behind win over Maine on Wednesday, I believe. And on Saturday, they had a 3-2 overtime win at Northeastern Matthews Arena. Always a tough place to play. So that's an impressive win for UConn. We talked about Firstov in the 3 stars of the week. The goalie Thomas Vamaka, the Czech Republic, also had a big week, stopping 37 shots. UConn was on a bit of a roll a few weeks ago. They'd won, 4 or 5, something like that. Then they settled for a tie and suffered 4 straight losses.
Yeesh.
So they kind of slid back down to earth a little bit. But they had a good weekend this weekend. Now they're 9-10-4 overall. They're 7th in the conference standings. Again, the top 8 teams in Hockey East make the playoffs. So it's kind of a fight between UConn, UNH, and Maine right now for those final 2 spots. We'll see how that goes. But I think UConn's a dangerous team. I'm not saying they're going to win Hockey East or anything, but they're a team, if they make the playoffs, I could see a first-round upset. They have a lot of talent on that team. And again, you get a hot goalie. Vamaka was good this weekend. You never know what can happen. And I like UConn, and I thought they looked great this weekend. That's a good win against Northeastern.
Yep.
So I'm still buying in on UConn just a little bit.
It's a scrappy bunch.
Agree. Speaking of buying in, I don't know how you could buy in any more on a team than BC. They had another big weekend. They beat Lowell, and then they beat BU in the latest edition of the Com-Av rivalry. Hutsko was huge, as we mentioned again, but he was far from the only one. Julius Matilla had 4 points over the 2 wins. David Cotton, one of the Eagles' best players, added 3 assists. The Eagles had their 10-game winning streak snapped by UMass last week, and we talked about it. But they clearly are back on track, and they're just, they're one of the best programs in the country, and they should be right in the mix for a national championship this season. I mean, they're one of the most talented teams that you're going to find, and a ton of fun to watch. So they get back on track this week. They're an absolute wagon. Just hope no weird injuries crop up, because it's going to be fun to see them go against some of the other better teams in the nation once the tournament comes around. And finally, New Hampshire, my UNH Wildcats, They split with number 11 Providence. UNH won 4-3 at Providence in the first game, which seemed to bode well for a potential sweep because coming back home to the Whittemore Center where UNH had won like 8 in a row or something like that, you'd think great thing for the Wildcats. But unfortunately, Providence came into Durham the next night and got a 5-1 victory. So UNH's home streak ended. UNH actually had a 3-0 lead in the first game, but Providence fought back until Angus Cruikshank scored the game winner with under 4 minutes left. So again, a good result for UNH against a very good Providence team. Wildcats now are 12-9-1 and in the 8th spot in the Hockey East standings. Again, it all comes down to points within the conference. So just because you have a better overall record than a team like UConn, it doesn't matter. It's about how you do against Hockey East opponents. So right now, UNH is in that final spot, just ahead of Maine, I believe. So it's going to be interesting to see which one of those, how that all shakes out. Obviously, I hope UNH makes it because they're my team. I think they also are a dangerous team where as long as they get in, doesn't shock me at all if they make it to the championship weekend for Hockey East.
Yep.
So we'll see what happens.
Dangerous. They're a dangerous squad,
Dangerous team. Yeah. So again, just wanted to highlight some of the stuff across Hockey East because I think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on, and as we get deeper into the season, we'll kind of know a lot more about these teams. So good stuff. Before we get to the polls and a little Hobey Baker talk, I want to go over a few more notable results from the week. Minnesota State sweeps Bowling Green. Bowling Green, one of the more underrated teams in the country. Minnesota State, one of the most revered teams in the country. And so I was kind of looking at this to see, can Bowling Green make yet another statement? They've had a lot of big wins this season, and they did not. Minnesota State, I wouldn't say dominated them, but it was a pretty they handled them pretty well. So they swept Bowling Green. Big win, big weekend for Minnesota State. They just look awesome. The second one came in overtime for whatever that's worth. North Dakota ties, then beats Miami 5-3. Again, North Dakota is awesome, but after losing last week, you're kind of hoping to just kind of dominate this weekend, and they didn't. They tied a Miami team that really they should beat, and then the second night they beat them 5-3. They should blow that team out. So again, maybe it's not a big deal, but it's worth noting. North Dakota maybe kind of falling into some bad habits. Who knows? Cornell ties, then beats Northern Michigan. Just noteworthy. I mean,
good hockey.
Yeah, I mean Cornell's a great team, and Northern Michigan gave them a good fight. So good stuff. Ohio State and Notre Dame tie, then Ohio State wins. Again, I just can't figure out Notre Dame. It's really my only takeaway. I don't know what they are. Michigan blows out Penn State 6-0, then ties. Michigan, a sneaky good team this season, as basically every team in Michigan apparently is. And Quinnipiac with a 4-3 win over Holy Cross. Holy Cross isn't any good or anything, and I'm not saying this is an insanely impressive win over Quinnipiac, but after they slid out of the national polls, they were kind of in a tough way there for a while, and they've won a few games here in a row, sort of refound their game. They continued it this weekend with a win over Holy Cross. Now they're up to 17 in the polls, so maybe Quinnipiac has found itself a little bit just in time for the postseason. It's a program that has a lot of experience in the tournament, and so we'll just I think it's a team not a lot of fans are paying attention to because they kind of wrote them off after they had a tough start to the season, but they're sneaking their way back into the conversation. So curious to see how that goes. Okay, want to get to the national polls, as we like to get to every week. I know, Patrick, you have a few takeaways, as you always do.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so number 1, Cornell. Number 2, North Dakota, then Minnesota State, Boston College, Denver, Ohio State, UMass, Clarkson, Penn State, Providence, Minnesota Duluth, UMass Lowell, number 12, Arizona State, 13, then Northeastern, Northern Michigan, Harvard, Quinnipiac, Bowling Green down to 18, and then Michigan State and Dartmouth. So not a ton of shuffling around, but there was some interesting stuff.
True. We talked last week. Last week there was not really any changes in the poll more than one spot, but we got a few this week more so. Penn State, first up. They dropped from 6 to 9 after getting swamped by Michigan, as you mentioned. They tied 4-4, then lost in a 3v3 overtime. Penn State, solid team. I think they're fine. Michigan, like you mentioned, is a good team. So big drop of the week, 6 to 9. Minnesota Duluth is up next. I think I already said enough negative things about them, but they fell from 8 to 11. And this isn't really that negative, but so this week we have a 1 and a 2 as opposed to last week we had Cornell and North Dakota tied at 1, but still only separated by 2 points in the poll, so they're a two-headed monster. And then on the bright side, high risers of the week, not really many more than one, but I wanted to highlight Boston College moving up from 5 to 4. I believe this is their highest ranking so far of the season. I might be wrong about that, but I think that is their highest. They have a 3-game win streak now since their 10-gamer got snapped by UMass. So they're doing just fine. And then you mentioned Ohio State a little bit, and they're up from 9 to 6 after their contest versus Notre Dame. They're 3-1-1 over their last 5.
Really good team.
Really good team. Really good time to be playing good hockey.
Yeah.
But aside from that, not really that much going on.
No, but again, I think some interesting stuff. And again, as always, as we get further into the season, there's not as much shuffling because it's pretty clear who is who and how good these teams are. So whenever they win or lose, it's just a little bit of moving up.
Yeah. I wanted like a 6-spot drop next week. That's what I want.
You want something crazy?
I want Clarkson to fall to 14. Like something crazy to happen.
Wishing ill on Clarkson.
I have nothing against Clarkson at all. That's just middle of the pack on this sheet I'm looking at.
Okay. Okay, we don't have a ton of time left. Couple things I want to get to. It is not Hobey Baker season, but we're starting to get into that conversation a little bit. Now the fan ballot is out online where, I think nearly or all the programs in the country nominate at least 1 up to 3 players for the Hobey Baker. Then it gets really complicated where fans can vote, and then it gets whittled down, and then there's a committee, and then the fan vote still factors in, all this stuff. But regardless, you can Google Hobey Baker and see the ballot and see who's up, who's available, and who, if a player from your favorite team has a chance. But I just wanted to highlight the players from Hockey East that made the ballot real quick. I believe there's like 12 or 15 of them. Max Gilden at UNH, the defenseman who has had a great season, a really underappreciated player in Hockey East and in the nation, I believe, really productive for the Wildcats, has had a great season. David Cotton, Boston College, has to be one of the, I don't know if he's I'd think one of the front runners or one of the favorites to win the Hobey Baker. David Ferentz at BU, Jack Dugan at Providence, 42 points. I'm not sure if that leads the nation, but it's got to be up there. He's had an awesome season. Stefanos Lekas, goalie from UVM. John Leonard, UMass, having a great season. Tyler Wall, who we seem to talk about every week. Great net for Lowell. He's on the ballot. Spencer Knight, goalie for BC. Patrick Harper for BU, who's had a great season, really stepping in after Monty went down. Tyler Madden from Northeastern, he's got to be up there too for one of the favorites. Tice Thompson from Providence, and Mitchell Chafee from UMass. So all great players.
Yep.
We still have around half a season to go, so I don't want to start speculating with who's going to win. But I just thought it was worthy mentioning these guys from Hockey East.
True.
And all of them, you can make compelling cases. I mean, there's a lot of good players, and I'm really curious to see where the Hobey Baker goes this year because there's so many good programs. There's so much parity now and so much talent at all these programs that it's not, you don't look at it and just go, well, it's just going to be some player from Minnesota or Boston College. It can be anywhere, and I'm really looking forward to see who gets it this season. But
I agree with that.
Yes.
If I had a vote, which I guess I do with the fan vote, Tyler Wall is my guy. We've been talking about it a lot, but I would like to see David Cotton get it because we had him on the podcast. So
you're biased, okay?
There it is, right there. Podcast bump. David Cotton.
I'll go along with that. I'll show some love to friends of the program. So I just wanted to mention those players real quick, and start looking out because there's going to be a lot more Hobey Baker buzz. If you follow these teams on social media, you've probably already seen the vote for this player campaign. So look out for that as we get deeper into the season. Before we get out of here, I want to highlight a couple games over the weekend that I'm going to be looking forward to. Cornell faces Dartmouth, then Harvard. Cornell, #1 team of the country. Dartmouth hasn't had the season that a lot of fans expected, but I still think they're a decent team. Harvard, that's been your team. They've been up and down a little bit, but they're certainly capable of beating Cornell. So it's just back-to-back nights of really good hockey.
True.
Curious to see how that goes. Maine and BC with a 2-game series. Again, Maine just outside of the playoff picture, I believe, in Hockey East. So they need, it's a tough task trying to beat Boston College, but you got to figure it out. So big opportunity for Maine to make a statement and get back into the playoff standings a little bit. UNH and UMass with a 2-game series. I believe it's a home and home. I'm not positive. But either way,
I believe so.
Either way, big opportunity again for UNH. They beat UMass earlier in the season. UMass definitely the better team, but UNH very capable. So I'm curious to see if the Wildcats can get another quality split. North Dakota and Minnesota Duluth with a 2-game series. Again, North Dakota, they've had a couple weird weekends, but they're still one of the best programs in the country. And really, this is more of an opportunity, I think, for Minnesota Duluth to sort of reassert itself and remind everybody how good they really are.
True.
Because they've been struggling a little bit. So really looking forward to that. And then elsewhere, some great Big Ten action. Ohio State taking on Minnesota, Penn State and Michigan State, Wisconsin and Notre Dame, all great programs, all great hockey. And if I get a chance, I'm going to try to tune into at least a couple of those matchups because they're a lot of fun to watch.
I agree.
So that's where I'm at. We end with finally getting a break from football for a little bit.
True. Unless you're watching the Pro Bowl.
Unless you're watching the Pro Bowl. So if you're not going to watch the Pro Bowl, you got a lot of college hockey you can watch this weekend. So, and before we wrap up, I just want to give you the Nessun schedule one more time. It starts Friday. It's all men's hockey this weekend. Friday, Vermont at Merrimack at 7 p.m. on Nessun. At the same time, Maine at Boston College at 7 p.m. on Nessun Plus. Next night, on Saturday, as part of our Super Saturday, ton of college action going on. We got BU at Lowell at 6 p.m. on Nessun. And Umass at UNH at 7 p.m. on Nessun Plus. Remember, all of our hockey's coverage is brought to you by Rockland Trust, where each relationship matters. That's all I got. You got anything else, Patrick? Anything else to add to the program?
I wish I did.
You just want to go home?
I'm here for a lot longer tonight, but I have nothing else to add. Nothing of substance.
Neither do I. I do want to add, actually, one more thing. Next week will be a Beanpot preview.
Oh, crap.
Beanpot preview episode of the Nessun College Hockey Podcast. We're going to go to Beanpot Media Day, find some players and coaches to interview, come back with some sound. Nessun's going to be sending people to cover the men's and women's Beanpots. So we're really looking forward to that.
Who knows what's going to happen.
We'll also have Logan Mullen and Lauren Campbell. I believe Logan's on the podcast next week as a guest, and then the 2 weeks after that, Logan and Lauren are both going to be joining us to talk about the Beanpots and everything. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Beanpot's a great tournament, and we're fortunate to be able to have it on Nessun, so we're looking forward to that. So next week, Beanpot preview. Look forward to that. We'll talk about all that next week. We'll recap all the action from this weekend, and we'll get back to you next week. So again, thank you for listening, everybody, to another edition of the Nessun College Hockey Podcast, and we will see you next week.